What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, I want to talk about my top 20 tight end rankings for redraft fantasy football. We've recently done the quarterbacks. We're going to work our way through all of the positions, hitting the running backs and the wide receivers as well. But as I mentioned, today is the tight ends. So let's not waste any more time. If you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure you're subscribed. Trying to get to 3,000 subscribers by week 1. And with that out of the way, let's hop right into today's video. Let's start talking about these rankings. So as you guys can see, I have the tier maker pulled up onto the screen. I have 6 tiers in order to get through all 20 of these tight ends today. So we will be working our way from tier 1 all the way down to tier 6. Now, if you guys are curious, the settings in which these rankings are based off of, it is your standard PPR settings. No bonuses, no tight end premiums, just standard PPR rankings for your tight ends in this rankings list today. Now, with that said, let's start off in tier 1. Tier 1, I have 2 players, Travis Kelce and Sam LaPorta. Now, Travis Kelce, it goes without saying, he has been one of the best fantasy football tight ends probably ever of all time. Last year, banged up to start the season, but he still finished with 14.6 fantasy points per game. That was number 1 in the NFL still. So even though Sam LaPorta, the new kid on the block, came in, took the world by storm, averaging 14.1 fantasy points per game himself, I still think the tight end 1 in fantasy football, that title belongs to Travis Kelce. I still have him as my tight end 1 in 2024. Maybe after that, I will switch these guys. But you also got to look at Sam LaPorta as far as the fantasy football production from 2023. There was a lot of touchdowns, double-digit touchdowns for the rookie. I think there may be some touchdown regression here in 2024. And you also looked at Amon-Ra St. Brown, still expected to have a big role in the offense. Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, and potentially a breakout from Jameson Williams this year. He's been getting a lot of camp hype. I think Sam LaPorta will still be a key part of this offense. Obviously, my tight end 2 overall in my rankings, but it's still Travis Kelce's world, and we're just living in it for fantasy football. Give me these 2 guys in tier 1. Now, moving on to my tier 2, I have 3 players in this tier as well. We will talk about Mark Andrews, Trey McBride, and Dalton Kincaid. And this is that next tier of elite tight ends. I think all 5 of these tight ends have the tight end 1 overall on the season type of potential. You look at Mark Andrews last year, banged up as well. He missed some time, but when he is on the field for the Baltimore Ravens, he is the number 1 receiving target. He is Lamar Jackson's favorite receiving option, and he is still dominant for fantasy football. 13.5 fantasy points per game last year. I think if he can stay healthy for the entire year, again, we're looking at a guy who has top tier, top tight end 1 type of potential. And I think the same thing can be said for guys like Trey McBride and Dalton Kincaid. Now, McBride, he broke out in 2023, became Kyler Murray's favorite target. Now, that kind of goes without saying because the options that Kyler Murray was throwing to down the stretch weren't good. I mean, it was kind of a banged up Hollywood Brown and then really nobody else. You insert Marvin Harrison Jr. in this offense, I think maybe you kind of think that Trey McBride will take a step back. It doesn't really matter too much to me. I think that Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to help elevate this offense. Another year of healthy Kyler Murray, I think that is going to mean big things for the Arizona Cardinals. And at worst, Trey McBride is the number 2 receiving option in this offense. That's what I like to target when I look for tight ends that can finish as elite tight end 1s. McBride still has that upside. And like I said, last year, the back half, he really broke out. I think he can be a PPR monster in 2024. And lastly, Dalton Kincaid. I was talking about, being the second best receiving option in your offense. How about being the number 1 receiving option in your offense as a tight end? Stephon Diggs, out of town. Gabe Davis, out of town. Insert Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, and Curtis Samuel in this offense. If you ask me, it looks a lot like Dalton Kincaid is going to be asked to take a major step forward in 2024, and he's going to be the main focal point of this receiving offense as a sophomore. Now, last year, he still performed very well. You look at Dalton Kincaid and Sam LaPorta's rookie year, I think Sam LaPorta really overshadowed how good Dalton Kincaid was as a rookie. It took a while for him to get on the field. The snaps didn't really happen until Dawson Knox went down, but once Dawson Knox went down, Dalton Kincaid, he was exactly what we wanted out of him. He's kind of used as a wide receiver in this offense. He plays a lot of his snaps in the slot. I think big things are coming from Dalton Kincaid, and he is probably one of my favorite picks to make, especially because he has the lowest ADP of all of these guys, but he still has the upside of all of these guys. So he is a awesome pick in fantasy football. Now, moving on to our next tier here, 3 more guys as well. We got Kyle Pitts in tier 3 with George Kittle and Evan Engram. Now, this is kind of a tier of players that are still going to be very solid tight end ones for fantasy football, but maybe you don't feel as safe about them as you do the guys above them in those top 2 tiers. Now, Kyle Pitts, it's kind of been the story for a long time. Kyle Pitts has the talent, he has the athleticism to break out for fantasy football and really be a massive fantasy football producer, but he hasn't had the quarterback play. Insert Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is now the quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons, and yes, he's recovering from an Achilles injury, but he should still be very good for this Falcons team, and he is supposed to be ready to go for week 1, so I don't think we need to worry too much about Kirk Cousins. All of the reports are that him and Kyle Pitts have been on the same page all offseason. We know how Kirk Cousins fed TJ Hockenson when he was in Minnesota. Maybe they can do the same thing with Kyle Pitts here in Atlanta. I think this is going to be a make or break year for Kyle Pitts, but if I had to make a bet on whether he makes or breaks in 2024, I do lean that he will break out for the first time in 2024 and will actually give us those top 6 numbers that we want out of Kyle Pitts. Now, George Kittle, goes without saying, he's been one of the best fantasy football tight ends for a long time, and I will put this caveat out there. At the time of this recording, I'm recording this on Friday, August 16th at about 1 p.m. Eastern. Brandon Ayuk is still a San Francisco 49er. I don't want to keep doing the, caveat of Brandon Ayuk, but it seems like we're going to have to keep doing that. I will say that if Brandon Ayuk does get traded from the San Francisco 49ers, you have to move George Kittle up, and he most likely goes all the way up into that tier 2 of tight ends, especially considering the jump he is going to get in volume in this offense here with Brock Purdy if Ayuk is not there. Now, this ranking is based on Ayuk being a 49er. So George Kittle, even as is, I got him as my tight end 7. Last year, averaged 12.7 fantasy points per game. He's going to be inconsistent. There's going to be games where Christian McCaffrey goes off, Debo goes off, Ayuk goes off, Kittle goes off, and it's going to be hard to judge which game is going to be which guys. That's just kind of the world that you have to live in with George Kittle. You can't really choose. You just get the boom weeks when they happen, and you live with the results when they are duds. I think George Kittle is going to still be an elite tight end for us. There's really nothing to worry about, but keep an eye on him because if Brandon Ayuk does get moved, he could skyrocket up my rankings. And then lastly, you have Evan Engram here. Evan Engram, kind of the dark horse, and I think a lot of people are in love with Evan Engram, rightfully so, because of the production he gave us last year. 13.5 fantasy points per game. He was up there with Mark Andrews and Sam LaPorta as far as the fantasy points per game goes. Now you look at what that came with, that was a massive target share. Christian Kirk injured, banged up for a decent part of the year. Trevor Lawrence banged up. Obviously, Calvin Ridley's still in town, but a lot of things have changed going into 2024. I don't necessarily expect Evan Engram to get the same target share that he got in 2023 that he will get in 2024. I think that Brian Thomas Jr. and Trevor Lawrence are going to help each other elevate this offense, kind of add some bigger plays and some more upside to this offense. So there is an opportunity for something like that with Engram, but I do think this is a guy you still got to draft as a tight end 1. Obviously, I still have him in the same conversation as George Kittle and Kyle Pitts if you can get him at a discount in your drafts, because some people just don't think that last year was going to be sustainable. I still think he's going to give you those top numbers. You can expect double-digit fantasy points per game out of Evan Engram in 2024, and I still have him in my tier 3 as my tight end 8. Now let's move on to tier 4, and I will say tier 4 is the last tier of tight ends that I'm comfortable drafting as my tight end 1 and keeping that as the only tight end on my roster. This is going to be Jake Ferguson of the Dallas Cowboys and David Njoku of the Cleveland Browns. And as I mentioned, these are the last of the true tight end ones. Ferguson last year kind of had a breakout. I think you look at this Dallas Cowboys offense and you say they didn't really do anything to improve. In fact, they may have even gotten worse with the departure of Tony Pollard. And now that backfield is going to be ran by Ezekiel Elliott and Rico Dowdle. I think Jake Ferguson has double-digit touchdown upside in this Dallas Cowboys offense that is likely going to be passing the football a lot here in 2024. And I think Jake Ferguson has the chance to be the number 2 receiving option on this offense by a long shot. Brandon Cooks, he's a solid wide receiver. I think Jake Ferguson will see more targets than Brandon Cooks in 2024, making him a PPR monster with massive touchdown upside in a good offense. Definitely a value pick at the tight end position. I love drafting Jake Ferguson if I can get my hands on him and I don't get one of the top 5 tight ends. That is the tier that I like to get to, and I like to grab Jake Ferguson there. And then the other player, David Njoku, he had a very good year last year. Now, there are some question marks with it. Amari Cooper there, Jerry Jeudy now added to the offense. No Nick Chubb. Probably to start the year, it's probably a 50-50 chance he's there week 1, but he's banged up and he's probably not going to be healthy for a majority of the season, at least not to Nick Chubb's old standard. Now you look at David Njoku and you look at the splits with Deshaun Watson and Joe Flacco. Njoku kind of performed better with Watson off of the field in 2023. I'm going to be keeping an eye on that. I think because of that, that's why I have Jake Ferguson ahead of him, even though David Njoku averaged more fantasy points per game last year than Ferguson. But that risk alone makes me want to take Ferguson more. The pathway is a little bit clearer, but David Njoku is still a top 10 tight end in my book and worthy of taking as your tight end 1. So as I mentioned, that tier 4 was the last of the tight end 1s. If you are drafting tight ends as your tight end 1 in tier 5 or tier 6, you probably should take 2 of these guys and stream the matchups to begin the year and see what you have at the tight end position. I will talk about this tier. It is a large tier of players, 6 guys overall. At tight end 11, you have Brock Bowers, tight end 12, Pat Freiermuth, 13, Kmet, 14, Dallas Goedert, 15, TJ Hockenson, and 16, Dalton Schultz. Now I'll go through this tier fairly quickly. I think Brock Bowers, he is an elite talent. As a rookie, you can't expect him to be elite right away. The Sam LaPorta seasons, the Dalton Kincaid seasons, those things are rare, and they take good offenses and good positive touchdown regression and things like that to happen for you as a rookie. Brock Bowers in this Las Vegas Raiders offense, I don't expect it to be a great offense. I don't necessarily expect Brock Bowers to just come out of the gates swinging like Sam LaPorta did with double-digit touchdowns. Maybe he can prove me wrong. He definitely has the talent to do so, but because of that, you got to put him in this tier 5, and you got to proceed with caution in 2024 during his rookie season, but he still is my tight end 11, so definitely a guy that you can still look at for your tight end 1. Now, Freiermuth is one of my favorite sleepers in fantasy. I think you look at how Arthur Smith uses his tight ends. He gives them a massive target share. He's been doing that from his time in Atlanta. Now you have him here with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and yes, again, we talk about the Brandon Ayuk caveat. He has been linked to the Steelers. If he goes to the Steelers, Freiermuth goes down my rankings, but as of right now, he is not a Pittsburgh Steeler, and Pat Freiermuth is the number 2 receiving option in this offense. I think it's going to be George Pickens and Pat, and I think Pat is going to have a lot of touchdown upside, and he's going to have a lot of receptions to help you in those PPR leagues. Definitely a sleeper, and you can probably get him much later than guys in this similar tier like Kmet, Dallas Goedert, TJ Hockenson. My guess is in drafts, you'll be able to get Pat Freiermuth later than those guys as well. Now, I think we can bunch Kmet, Dallas Goedert, and Dalton Schultz all kind of into a similar bucket because these are talented tight ends. They've shown us that they can produce when given the opportunity. I mean, Kmet, double-digit fantasy points per game last year. Dallas Goedert, almost the same thing, was 9.7, and Schultz, double-digit last year as well. But all of these offenses are very, very crowded. The Bears, they've improved a lot. You got Rome Odunze there. You got Keenan Allen there. DJ Moore there as well. I think Kmet probably is the 4th receiving option in this offense. Now, Dallas Goedert, you have a similar situation with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, and now a Saquon Barkley in the backfield as well. Probably the 4th option on their offense. And Dalton Schultz, again, the same thing. Stephon Diggs there now in Houston with Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and you have Joe Mixon there. You could even say Dalton Schultz is the 5th option in this offense. They're going to be very inconsistent, probably better picks in your best ball leagues where you don't have to pick when to start them. And that in itself is why I would say you have to grab 2 of these guys if you're in a lineup league, because it's going to be hit and miss with those prospects. But all of these guys have the talent. They just don't have the opportunity right now. Maybe an injury or 2 happens and then they have the opportunity, but probably not guys that I'm looking to grab in my fantasy football drafts if I can avoid them. Now, TJ Hockenson, obviously the talent for him himself probably deserves to be in tier 1 or tier 2. I mean, you look at last year in fantasy football, he averaged 14.6 fantasy points per game. That was the same as Travis Kelce. And as I mentioned, Travis Kelce was number 1 in fantasy points per game at the tight end position. So he was tied with TJ Hockenson. Hockenson, he's going to be recovering from an ACL injury. It's not likely that he is going to be ready until probably after the first month or 2 of the fantasy football season. And now you have JJ McCarthy go down. Not like we were projecting JJ McCarthy to be the starter for the entirety of the season, but it might cap the upside of this offense in the back half of the year. I think this is kind of going to be a redshirt year for the Vikings and maybe even TJ Hockenson. Maybe they take it slow with him now that they know that the year is kind of not over yet, but it doesn't look great for the Vikings. He's probably something I'm avoiding. But let's say you're in your draft and you grab a guy like Pat Freiermuth and you also grab a guy like TJ Hockenson. I think the second half there is upside with Hockenson, but you also risk the chance of holding him for a long time and him not really doing anything in the back half either. And now let's look at the final tier. There's quite a few guys in here, but to get to tight end 20, we have Noah Fant for the Seattle Seahawks, Tyler Conklin for the New York Jets, Hunter Henry for the New England Patriots, and Cade Otton for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now you look at Noah Fant and you look at this offense here now with Ryan Grubb calling the plays, and you also have that Ravens influence moving over to Seattle with Mike McDonald. Noah Fant could have a breakout year here in 2024. It's maybe a smaller chance because last year you see the fantasy points per game, 4.3, but this offense, this regime, They did choose to bring Noah Fant back. He was a free agent this offseason. I don't know. Maybe he gets involved a little bit this year. He's somebody who has some upside. We've seen the athleticism of Noah Fant. Just a dart throw I think you can make in drafts and maybe see that Ravens influence of how they've used Mark Andrews and how they've used guys like even Isaiah Likely at times. Maybe Noah Fant gets some play in this offense as well. Now, Tyler Conklin is another bet that you can make. He's been one of the most targeted tight ends over the last couple of seasons, and that has been with poor quarterback play. Now, you have Aaron Rodgers here. Obviously, Mike Williams is in this offense. He's probably not going to be too good to go week one. And then you have guys like Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson. Obviously, we know that they are studs. Maybe Tyler Conklin is sneaky going into the 2024 season. Maybe he keeps getting the targets, and maybe with the upgrade in quarterback play, there's more touchdown potential for a guy like Tyler Conklin. Definitely somebody to keep an eye on. Now, Hunter Henry, he's a guy I was a little bit lower on early in the offseason, but I think Drake May and I think Jacoby Brissett are going to be decent enough in this offense that there should be at least a little bit of efficiency. But more so, I think you look at Hunter Henry and you say, all of the receiving options here haven't really established themselves yet. If Hunter Henry is going to be successful, he's going to have to score some touchdowns. He's going to have to be a red zone target for them. And I think he could. The upside's probably not very high. He definitely feels like a guy who, at best, he's finishing as tight end 12, tight end 13. And he's more so likely finishing here about where we have him in our rankings. And then Cade Otton, he had a good couple of games down the stretch last year in the playoffs for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Dave Canales no longer in this offense. You add Jalen McMillan in the slot, or maybe even on the outside. They've been talking about maybe Godwin being in the slot. Otton, he's a dart throw. Probably not anybody that you want to grab either late in your drafts, but in order to round out the top 20, I think Otton is the guy, and there's enough targets here for him, and we saw enough upside from him in the late parts of last season that you can see a pathway for him to at least be somewhat relevant in fantasy football. So there you have it. Those are my top 20 tight ends. As you guys can see, basically tier 1 to tier 4, those are the guys you want to target in your drafts. The tight end ones for your fantasy football team. Anything from tier 5 to tier 6, most likely just tier 5. You want to try and grab 2 of those guys and stream the matchups. Tier 6, you can take some flyers on those guys if you like them. But overall, those are the top guys. My favorite thing this year, grab one of the top 5 tight ends. That tier 1, that tier 2. The ADP for the guys in tier 2 is pretty solid for the value that I think that they will provide your teams. Tier 3 is going to be pretty good for you as well. But most likely, as I mentioned, tier 1 to tier 4, those are the guys you should be looking at. Now, if you guys did enjoy today's video, go ahead and hit that like button for me. It is the best free way to show this channel some support. And as I mentioned, we've already done the quarterbacks version of this video. We are going to be doing the running backs and the wide receivers in the upcoming days. So if you haven't watched those and you want to watch those upcoming videos, make sure you are subscribed to the channel and hit that notification bell. That way you never miss those uploads when they do come out. As I mentioned, a goal of 3,000 subscribers by week 1. I think we can do it if we all rally and hit that subscribe button right now. So make sure you do that for me. And last but not least, go join my Discord. I do have a free Discord linked in the description. I'm in there helping you guys with your fantasy football teams, redraft, dynasty, best ball, trade questions, waiver questions, anything you guys got. Start sits as the season goes on. I got you covered. There's a great community of people in there. Just the other day, we were doing an AMA. I had some time talking with the people in there. It was a really fun time. Make sure you go join the Discord. As I mentioned, it is free to join, so there is no risk in doing that. And with all of that out of the way, like I said, nothing else for you today. So I will see you on our next video. But until then, peace out.